everybody? We are back. It is Taped On Live, favorite Raiders podcast, favorite Raiders channel, favorite Raiders everything. We are back. You guys already know what to do. Hit the subscribe button. Subscribe. Hit the like button if you like it. Hit the dislike button if you don't like it. Leave a comment if you like it. Leave a comment if you don't like it. Also follow us on Twitter at @TheMarkJohnNFL for me, at MHolder95 for Matt. And of course, Panda Supplements. Use TDL for 35% off. All right, so got a little Steelers preview. Of course, we talk Steelers. You got my man Derrick in the room. So that's Derrick Bell at Steelers_DB. Follow him, even because when draft time comes, you're gonna like it. So you might not like seeing all the Steelers stuff during the season. Draft time, you're gonna follow him. So make sure you hit the follow button with him. And he always comes and talks that Steelers football with us. So I really appreciate you coming on once again, Derrick. So how you feeling, man?
Yes, sir, man. I think it's my third or fourth appearance on Taped On Live. So as a regular viewer, you talk about people not necessarily needing to follow me to see all the Steelers stuff, man. I'm a regular in the TDL chat, or I enjoy watching the content, even if it's not Steelers related, because I know you and I see the game in a very similar way. Which makes for good conversations between us. But also I feel like I, learn a lot from not just you, but obviously BD as well. He's on his hiatus, but, I think Matt's doing a really good job filling in for him. So channel's doing well, man. Excited to talk some Steelers Raiders football again.
Yeah, man. This has become a yearly occurrence at this point, man. I guess you both finished in third place. You got to play each other.
Right. That's how it's working out these
days. Yeah. So, how you feel about the series overall before we'll get into offense, we'll get into defense, and, how you feel about the game. How do you feel about the Steelers overall after watching it for 2 games?
Yeah, man, it's a little bit of a weird vibe, to be honest with you. Coming off that preseason in which they, finished undefeated, it really felt like the hype was kind of going off the rails a little bit. Even the national media was kind of, showing a lot of love to the Steelers. The offense looked improved. Kenny Pickett had that really good preseason. And then, they get absolutely, ran out the gym against the Niners in week 1, which, Shanahan and that wagon of an offense have a tendency to do that to some teams, especially if you're not prepared. And last week was really a dogfight with the Browns, but I feel like they're probably pretty lucky to be 1-1 at where they're at. But it just feels weird, man, because I think that everyone kind of expects, week 1 aside, everyone expects this defense to be, one of the top units in the league. They should be a top 5, top 7 defense by the end of the year. But this offense, man, there's still more questions than answers at this point. And I just feel like it's been a little bit deflating to see how poorly they've performed so far this year, which is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of ruined the vibe a little bit, like on the Twitter sphere and even on like YouTube and like my comments and stuff. It just feels like until this offense breaks out, all the fan optimism and stuff is just going to kind of continue to be on the low.
All right, so let's talk about the scheme, because that's really the big problem with this offense. I think this offense has talent. But, the scheme is very vanilla. I saw a lot of slant flats this past game against the Browns. I was like, oh, wow, that's about 4 slant flats. It's a little too much slant flat for me. You could run that in the first half. You want to get an easy completion. That's cool. But we're doing it on third down, like in the third quarter.
Yeah.
We're we're not. This is in the 80s. This is in the 80s. Bill Walsh, old school West Coast offense. So, man. Go ahead and talk about the scheme a little bit, and maybe how much is that the actual problem with the offense?
Yeah, man. So, it's really tough to diagnose all the things wrong with this offense because, the players aren't executing, and I think that Canada has a lot of probably what I would classify as fatal flaws as a play caller or play designer. But the offense, it seems, I keep coming back to the word unimaginative. You mentioned like the slant flat, Hank, spacing, stick, those are things that every NFL playbook has in them. Mm-hmm. But it's like those aren't the, hey, let's go get our young quarterback a completion type of play calls. Those are the core concepts in the passing game. And then when you combine that with not having any sort of play action to really speak of. So the Steelers are 29th in play action percentage usage already this season. They finished in the bottom third last year as well. The only thing that they do off play action is boots and keepers. So they'll run naked bootlegs, basically slide concepts where you roll somebody to the flat and you flood the right side of the field. They'll run that, but there is no 3 or 5 step play action drops. Like there is no play action passing game to speak of. So if they're under center, you're either going to get, most likely outside zone. They run the ball like 80% of the time that they're under center. And if they're in the gun, they throw the ball like 80% of the time. So it's really predictable play calling. They did try some new wrinkles last week against the Browns. They had some, I don't know, I hate outside zone from the gun, but they tried to run outside zone from the gun a couple times, and they were able to work some play action stuff off of that to move the ball down the field. We're seeing a ton of cover 3 so far this year. So I just keep coming back to the word unimaginative, man. It's a very frustrating thing to watch, especially for like you and I who like really get envious of watching really good play calling. It's tough to watch on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I hate watching Mike McDaniel every week. That
just makes you jealous, right?
Just like, man.
Every week something new. It's
I mean, Josh McDaniels is interesting because with the way that he's calling plays for Jimmy Garoppolo at this point, it's kind of like he's not doing what Shanahan was doing. Basically, what I'm saying, it's like he's calling all these deep routes, he's calling these deep overs, and Jimmy's just not seeing them, and that's gonna be interesting for him on the Raiders offense. But I think he's trying to be a little bit more creative than he usually is this year. But I don't know why he's trying to do that with year one Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what's bothering me a little bit, but.
I know that I think you've talked about this too, like in your film breakdowns, but I don't know that I've ever seen a team run dagger this much. Like it literally, I felt like they were running dagger and 989 with Hunter Renfrow running down the middle of the field like 5 times. I was talking about this I was on another channel yesterday as doing like a guest spot on there, and I was literally talking to them about Josh McDaniels, and I was like, dude, I'm telling you that I think I saw McDaniels call dagger like 10 times in just my film study in the 2 games that I watched. And I was like, man, this is he's really hammering this home. And the thing is, like, Jimmy G will not throw it. Like he will not. He does not want to throw it. He's not like, I know the clear out's the alert. So like you normally don't get to that anyway, but like he's not looking at that at all. And then even the dig route stuff, like he's just basically like, oh, you're gonna call dagger. I'm gonna check this ball down to Josh Jacobs. It's funny, man.
I'm like, man, you need to trade for Matthew Stafford at this point if you're gonna run this much dagger. That's what I feel like. but anyways, back to the Steelers offense. So Kenny Pickett, how do you feel about him a little bit? How do you feel like how he's progressing? I saw some good throws from him, but it's kind of like he's a little overwhelmed, and I kind of feel bad for him a little bit too. So I don't know, like, if he had a better coordinator, would he be better? Like, so how do you feel about him so far this year?
Yeah, man, it's really tough because I think the things that he really did well towards the second half of last season, I thought that he took better care of the football. I thought he was a pretty solid decision maker, generally accurate to, down the sideline. He's accurate underneath. When he was playing quick game last year, he was pretty good. And then, they start the regular season this year, and it's like even the things that he was doing well late last season, he hasn't done well in the first 2 games. He hasn't taken good care of the football. He's made some weird decisions. He probably should have more interceptions than the 3 that he does have. And then just the general accuracy has been really perplexing to me as well. Not just like over the middle of the field, which was an area of concern coming into the season, even underneath. I mean, he's missed some throws that are, what we would classify as layups. You know what I'm saying? Like the ones that you absolutely have to hit, turning down some open throws. And I think, sometimes when quarterbacks get into this, like once NFL defensive coordinators have about a dozen games of tape on you, I do feel like there's a little bit of a shift in how they typically play you. And that's where you sometimes see like the quote unquote, like rookie wall or, some guys that don't necessarily take the step forward in year 2, like we expect, because coordinators have a better idea of like how you want to play. So like something that that NFL teams are doing through 2 weeks is they're just not playing man coverage against the Steelers. And like, they don't even have Deontay Johnson, who's been their kind of quick win man beater for a long time. They're not giving George Pickens like single high man coverage press reps because they saw like on tape last year, Kenny would just, if you check the single high and he sees it's cover 1, like that's where he's going. He's not looking anywhere else. They're just going to literally run a fade ball. They're going to throw it back shoulder to George. And George is, so unbelievable in those situations. So they're making some of these like zone checks. They're seeing a lot of spot drop cover 3. And right now they just don't have answers. And just in general, scheme aside, he just doesn't look comfortable in this offense whatsoever. And that's really disturbing when you have a young quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really built for him to be like not easy for him too. I mean, it's really old school. There's not a lot of
Yep.
motion, not a lot of movement. So it's just not a lot of movement,
They only
not a lot of
motion.
motion.
They only really motion under center, and then when they're under center, they really only run the ball. So there is no like the extent of their motion. Sometimes you'll have that like kind of ghost motion or fake motion to get your man or zone check for the quarterback. But aside from that, like there is no motion to like, okay, we're gonna motion this guy to the stack to create a rub, or hey, we're gonna motion this guy to get him out leveraged versus safety across the field or something like that. They don't do that stuff, and those are the kind of things along with like the play action. You don't necessarily have to be, the Eagles, for example, they don't run play
Mhm.
action either. But
Yeah,
like they have all those explosive weapons. Jalen Hurts is a really gifted runner. There's other ways to have a good offense without play action. But like
yeah,
how many different offenses around the league use these like play action concepts to kind of boost quarterbacks' efficiencies? Like you look at like Jared Goff at Detroit. You look at some of the Shanahan McVay guys. I know they're moving
yeah,
away from play action now, but like in the past like 5 years, how many of those guys have really seen their efficiency numbers just boost? Jimmy G, that's a good example.
yeah.
Jimmy G's numbers in play action with Shanahan were always really good. So I don't know. It's just there's not a lot of easy buttons in this offense, and he's not hitting the easy buttons when they're available either.
Yeah. So a little mixture of both. So I mean, with play action, I mean the Raiders don't really run play action right now either. I mean they got single high coming up, and I mean the Bills played the most single high I've ever seen them play. That was kind of
Yeah,
wild to watch. I
I
don't know if you
noticed that on
noticed
film
that.
too.
Yeah, they played a lot of single
And they're
high.
traditionally like split safety, like dominant zone heavy, split safety heavy for
Mm-hmm.
years.
And they're in the box heavy. So that kind of tells how, because the Steelers though they play more single high. I mean, we'll get into defense in a second, but I know they have naturally played single high more than most teams still, even with the whole two high revolution that we're seeing.
Mhm.
So it's gonna be interesting to see how they play the Raiders. But before we get to defense, I want to talk about the wide receivers. Calvin Austin, I see he's kind of like taking a little bit of a step too as a player. There was a little bit of he was running some mesh routes. So, he had a nice little catch on the outside, the pass game, and then of course George Pickens, who is really growing as a player. He's becoming definitely a stud wide receiver. Talk about those guys, and also the offensive line. How's the offensive line playing? I mean, I know they played two really great defensive lines.
Absolutely, yeah. That's necessary context.
You're right. They played two great defensive lines. It's also with the offense too. I mean, they played really, two really good defenses to open the year. So it's interesting to see how maybe if the Raiders are not that type of defense, how they react to it. But talk about the wide receivers and a little bit of the offensive line as well.
Yeah, so just like starting with the offensive line, man, they've honestly been brutal, especially in the run game. The Steelers have found themselves in a lot of 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10s, which is for young quarterbacks, you do not want to live in those situations, especially when you don't trust your tackles and pass protection, because then you have to go to a lot of 6, 7-man protections. You're not getting eligibles out, and that's the world that they've been kind of forced to live in when you can't run the football. Their center Mason Cole struggled a lot in the run game. Dan Morris had some troubles one-on-one, but they've given the tackles a lot of help because they faced Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa, two of the arguably the best pass rushers in the league, and then Okorafor at right tackle, he gets Max Crosby this week. So I think that they're going to use a similar blueprint to try to slow down Crosby, who I think is really one of my favorite players in the league to study. I wrote about him for SteelersNow.com this week, and he's just phenomenal. So few, if any, holes in his game. But the offensive line hasn't been great in pass protection either. Kenny's been under a lot of pressure. And, you brought up the context of playing really good fronts. We're going to see if that's, something that's going to continue because the Raiders, they've kind of been a little bit more of like a one-man band, at least from a pressure standpoint this year. I think Crosby's the only defensive lineman, edge rusher that has multiple pressures. I think the second leader in pressures, I think, is Spillane. Y'all been blitzing him a lot up the middle, like a lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
just this past game they started doing that, which
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, the offensive line needs to play better. They invested. They brought in Isaac Seumalo from the Eagles. He has struggled a little bit, which is kind of surprising a bit. But I think he'll kind of right the ship. But the entire offense has been brutal, to be honest with you. And then the really one bright spot has been George Pickens. I thought he was really good against Cleveland. They're allowing him to do more than he did last year. Part of that's because Deontay's been out, but he's not just running straight in a straight line anymore 90% of the game. And that's been refreshing to see. He's getting some dig routes, getting some stuff over the middle, which is stuff we were begging to see last year. And George, I think his game is kind of about to take a really big jump because of that, because defenders aren't going to be able to just key on him running fade balls 90% of the time. But George is awesome. And then Calvin, he's still trying to find his way. Calvin's a really interesting player because, he's sub 5'8", but he's an outside receiver. For the most part, that's how he was at Memphis. But they move him around a little bit. I think they want to get him some more scheme touches, jet sweeps, reverses. Kenny missed him on that mesh concept that you were talking about. The throw was behind. I think that could have been a really big play. So he's developing. They really, Deontay being out has kind of opened the door for him. But it's going to be interesting to see, those guys match up with, the Raiders corners. Marcus Peters, a guy that, the Steelers are obviously really familiar with from his days in Baltimore.
Yeah, even Pat Freiermuth, I kind of expect him to have some catches today just because the way the Raiders play defense
he's been quiet.
The heavy soft zone. Yeah, he's going to be right in the middle. I think Pickett might be throwing the ball a lot to him. So with that, let's transition to the defensive line, because I think this is going to be the Raiders' biggest test facing a defensive line. I think the Raiders have played one defensive line that's very, very suspect. Then they played one that had a big week, but I was watching on film like, okay, these guys they're good, but they're not like a dominant defensive line with the Bills, right? I mean, they can beat up on some bad offensive lines, and the Raiders' offensive line has played really well the past 2 weeks. Giving up I don't know what the pressure percentage, but it's only like 8 overall. In my charting, it's like 9, so it's not a lot of pressure they're giving up on dropbacks. So, but we got Benton, Larry. I can't even say his last name. Ogunjobi, and then TJ Watt, and of course Highsmith on the other side. It's gonna be tough for these boys. So talk about those guys and the rotation that you're doing. Because Marcus Golden was out there too, I believe, right?
Yep.
And which I was really jealous of. I'm gonna say that because Max Crosby, I think, plays too many snaps, and seeing TJ Watt take 6 snaps off.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, see, and that's why they're getting these he's staying fresh because he's able to take those 6 snaps off and have Marcus Golden come out there. But go ahead and talk about the defensive line a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the strength of the Steelers team, not just their defense, but their team in general. Their front, 4 or 5 guys is, as good as any in the NFL, really. I mean, you think about the edge rusher duo between Highsmith and Watt. Watt, obviously his resume kind of speaks for itself, but him being back healthy this year after he was even playing hurt when he came back last year, he's looked phenomenal, man. Still the same type of player. You get the crazy motor, the good bend, cross chop. You know exactly what you're getting from TJ. And then Highsmith's really taking a step forward, man. Last year he kind of broke out, had 14, 15 sacks, whatever. And, Highsmith, another speed rusher. Both of those guys have really good get-offs. Highsmith has a really deadly inside spin move counter that he kind of sets up over the course of the game. So I know the Raiders' tackles have been phenomenal in pass protection. I'm really excited to see how that matchup's going to play out because I think it's one of those good-on-good type situations. And, especially Jimmy G, I think one of the things that I've kind of always known about Jimmy G is he can be a little frenetic with his feet. I'll just say that. So they're gonna need to keep him kind of upright in the pocket, and then just along the interior too. Like you mentioned, Keanu Benton, man. I don't even think they're playing him enough. Dude, he has a really good first step, strong hands. I mean, when I was scouting defensive linemen coming out the draft, I really thought that his hand usage, just the way that he. Not just the pop, but just how quick they are, how he always has a, good leverage. I think that all that stuff is really encouraging. He's put some good reps on film, especially as a run defender. Ogunjobi's kind of a wild card, man, because he never practices. He's been hurt pretty much since the Steelers signed him. He failed a physical in Chicago last year. The Steelers picked him up. Did practice last year, had a little bit of an underwhelming year, but he was banged up to start this year. I've been told he's limping through the facility, and then he goes out on Sunday and Monday night, and he looks fantastic. He dominated Wyatt Teller, who I think is a really, really good right guard. for Cleveland, but he dominated the other night. So this is
Yeah.
a really talented front. Marcus Golden. I mean, when he's your, now that Cam Hayward's kind of out, he's shifted up a
Yeah.
little bit. But when a guy like Marcus Golden is your fifth, sixth, seventh best pass rusher, that's pretty awesome, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
luxury.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So I mean, that's why I was really jealous with the rotation, man, because Crosby's out there every single.
They got to get him help, man. It's impressive the fact that he's able to spend so much effort and play 96 or whatever % of the snaps or whatever he played last year. It's great that he can do that. But dude, I think you would see him go, and I really do believe he's one of the top 5 edge rushers in the league, bar none. But I think you'd see an even more efficient version of him if you could get his snaps to even like 80%. Like let him take a couple early down run snaps off, and where he can be a little more fresh. The dude might have 20 sacks, but that's my soapbox.
It's mine too. Every time I go on PFF and I see he has the most snaps for a defensive end, I'm like, oh, it's so ugly. That is so bad. It's ugly. It's just gross. All right. So so the defensive line kind of sets the tone. What about the rest of the defense? The secondary, I know, Minka's the best safety in football. I mean, there's really no question in my opinion. That's why they can still play single high, because they can move him around. He can do a lot of things. But what about the rest of the secondary? How are they looking? Kind of, let the people know about them.
Yeah, so I mean, the safeties in general, having Fitzpatrick, and then they kind of rotate their strong safety. So they've got Keanu Neal, who's more of a box guy, and then they've got DeMonte KZ, who can do a little bit of everything, but he can also play center field. So that allows them to kind of move Minka around a little bit. Those guys complement each other well. The Steelers played a lot of 3 safety sets. They play a good amount of dime. I think they've played the most dime snaps in the NFL so far this season. The weakness probably on this defense is probably the cornerbacks, Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace. I think the best expression I could use with them is like they're the classic like 77 overall corners that you just kind of put on a Madden roster after you just built the trenches to all get out. And you just hope that they can just hold their own. But like if you look at Brandon Ayuk and what he was able to do, week 1, anytime they pretty much asked any of those guys to cover him in man coverage or one-on-one singled up, it was just bad. And that's what really worries me about Devontae Adams, arguably still the best receiver in the league. The Steelers want to play more man coverage. They played more man coverage last year, but their man coverage rates through 2 weeks are down a little bit. I think it's just a little bit because not sure they really trust the corners as much to hold up in those spots. So the secondary, it is what it is. But, Minka, he kind of makes everything right back there. Just his range, he made a play against the Browns that was just absurd. They botched a cover 2 snap where, the middle field second level defender ended up getting sucked up to like a curl route or something like that underneath. And he comes out of nowhere and just like breaks up a dig from, depth. And it's just like, man, you're a freak. You're a freak, man.
He's wild to watch on film, man. He just makes plays. Yeah. And, he's going to be moving around too. And I think, one thing, I noticed last year from the game is that Mike Tomlin has a lot of familiarity with what Josh McDaniels likes to do because they've been playing for so long.
But yeah, he used to absolutely destroy them.
Yeah.
Destroy them.
So he has so much familiarity with him, right? He kind of has a good idea of what he wants to do. Like they're going to play the daggers. They're going to play the digs. They're going to know those things are coming. It's 3rd down. It's 3rd and 10. Dagger might be part of the concept on one of these sides of the field. I mean, it's pretty what he likes to do because even if you go back, a lot of people talk about Tom Brady throwing real short, throwing a lot of short passes. I went back and, I'm in the huddle with Coach Voss, and he has some old Bears, Vic Fangio. Everybody loves Vic Fangio. So it goes back to New England Patriots first time 2018, and they're running dagger then too. It's just, Tom Brady was running the offense. He just didn't, Josh McDaniels would call the play. Tom Brady. Yeah, it's different that way. So, those concepts are part of this. So
their game plan against the Raiders last year was really probably my favorite game plan that they had all season. There wasn't really anything like mystical to it, but they played a lot of 2-man because, Carr is not a runner. So, that gives you the ability to play 2-man, and they pretty much did that. And it allowed them to get multiple eyes on Devontae Adams pretty much throughout the game. Even Carr missed a couple throws that he probably should have hit.
Yeah.
but they contained Adams and didn't let him ruin the game. And that's always what I say about like superstar players. Your Max Crosby's, your Devontae Adams, like they're gonna probably get theirs, and like you may catch them every now and then on an off day, but like you just can't let them win the game on their own. And that's pretty
Yeah.
much what I thought that they did a good job of last year with Adams. Is they had James Pierre's he's like their fourth corner now, but he was their third corner at this point last year. But Pierre's a long guy who likes to play in press coverage and really likes to play in that trail tech. So they would just have him get up at the line of scrimmage, jam Adams, and even if he doesn't touch him, there's a safety over top. So you can just try to disrupt the timing and get two sets of eyes on him. I'm interested to see if they do that because the Steelers do a lot of you talk about Fangio, like something he's known for is all those post-snap rotations. The Steelers do so many post-snap rotations now. Like that's something that they really leaned into in recent years. You'll see them align too high pre-snap and then, have Mika come down and play like the hook curl or whatever, or vice versa with him and KZ. I'm interested to see if they do that and play some like robber type stuff. If they're bold enough, because Jimmy G is a little bit susceptible to sometimes throwing some picks over the middle of the field against some like robber like coverages. But there's always that kind of backside or backlash to that you have to leave Adams singled up on the outside, and that's a choice you have to live with. But there's a risk reward there, and I'm interested to see if like Tomlin and them kind of lean into that this week.
Yeah, because the Bills really didn't double Devontae Adams. I mean, they kind of let him roam a little bit.
I was surprised by that. Are they playing? They're playing this offense, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I was listening to you a little bit talk about the Bills tape when I was at work the other night, but it feels like they're playing this Raiders offense a little bit different with Jimmy G instead of Carr. I feel like you're seeing more stacked boxes, and Adams is getting some like one-on-one looks, and like even like Trey Tucker, like I felt like he was winning vertically on tape, but Jimmy G until Jimmy G proves that he can hit those sideline go balls, which has never really been like his thing. Like he wants to throw over the middle, anticipation, timing, all that stuff. Until he does that, I'm curious if teams are going to still try to kind of get 7-8 in the box and kind of react to that season that Josh Jacobs had last year.
Yeah. I mean, basically, how the offense is working right now is that they're stacking the box so much that the Raiders have to throw downfield. So like, Josh McDaniels is making these throws, he's trying to make some of these plays downfield, and it's just not working out for him what exactly he wants to do. So, because Jimmy, I don't to be honest, I really don't know what's wrong with Jimmy on some of these plays, man. I feel like he should hit him because he has the offensive line, it has the pocket.
They've been great.
So there's really no excuse, right? And he's looking right at it. I mean, it'll be different, I am. And if it's different, if it's on the backside, sometimes quarterbacks can get their eyes in the back of their head, but if you're just staring right at it, it's right through it. It's like, man, you gotta throw that ball.
I will say this: if there is like something concerning, it's just the Steelers corners. I think Peterson and Levi Wallace are both probably like 4'6" guys at the very best right now in a straight line. So it wouldn't surprise me, or I think it would probably be a good idea for the Raiders to try to take some deep shots, at least one to Tucker if they can get like single high, just because I know that he only ran like a 4.4 flat, but he's way faster than that in pads. Like I watched him at Cincinnati a good amount when I was studying Desmond Ridder when he was coming out. And I was flabbergasted when he only ran. I thought for sure he was going to run like 4.3. But you look at him on film, I mean, he was running by the Bills DBs. Not that those guys are like speedsters either, but there's opportunities to go down the field if the pass protection holds up and if Jimmy can, give him a chance.
Yeah, Trey Tucker. What's interesting with how they're using him is they're playing him outside, and he played in the slot in college. Yep. So I thought that's a weird dynamic. I mean, they're doing the same thing with Jacoby Myers. He hasn't been playing in the slot either when he played. He's just playing outside, and they're kind of doing those fade routes with him as well. So it's gonna be, this game is gonna be interesting because I think the offense for the Steelers, they've coming in playing like everybody's putting those EPA charts, right? The EPA chart has been all over Twitter, man. They're all the way on the left side by themselves, and the Raiders offense and the Raiders defense is just coming off a bad game. So it's going to be kind of see how these teams actually are, like who's actually the better team, who's the below average team, who's the mediocre team. That's really where we're going to find out this game, because I think it's going to be close, but I also think it's going to be low scoring. because I think the Raiders' offensive line, because Illuminor, he's been showing a little bit of cracks, right? If anybody in pass protection has been showing a crack, it's Illuminor. He's been getting pushed back, and then maybe Jimmy would get rid of the ball quick enough. But he's got Watt, so it's going to be an interesting game for him.
It's definitely going to be a good test, for the Raiders offensive line. I feel like if they hold up in pass protection, especially against the Steelers front, I think you guys will have to be extremely confident about, their ability moving forward. And, you talk about just some of the parallels between the two teams. The Steelers have only been successful, I think, on like 25% of their rushing attempts so far this season. And then I think that's 31st in the league. And then the Raiders are dead last at 21%. So it's like neither team has been able to run the ball. It's very interesting because there's been some parallels between the struggles with both teams, even though they're stylistically different. That I'm interested to see what happens. And the other thing to really point out with the matchup is like the Steelers have been historically bad against the Raiders, especially on the road forever. Like even when the Steelers have had much better teams from a talent perspective, not just compared to this one, but better teams than the Raiders in the past, they've struggled so much. I mean, I think that they've only won one road game against the Raiders in my lifetime. Like I really don't, I don't know that, I don't think it's happened very often. So that's the other thing is like them traveling to the West Coast, the Raiders being at home. That's why I wasn't, even though I do feel like the Steelers are probably a better team, the Raiders probably deserve to be favored just because the Steelers have historically struggled against them and in the West Coast. And this is the type of game where you're like, they should win, but they probably won't. So it's weird. It's fun. It's a weird dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, I remember all those games. It doesn't matter how good the Steelers were. They would come to the West Coast, to come to the Black Hole, and Terrell Pryor's going 95 yards.
Terrell, like some of the most random quarterback performances that I've ever seen. I remember where I was when Pryor broke that run. And then who else had I'm pretty sure Bruce Gradkowski led a game-winning drive against them.
No, that was in Pittsburgh, though. That was the.
I mean, they've had some just bonkers performances, man. Like, and I don't really understand why it's been like that. Even like you mentioned like the ugly games and why you expect it to be low scoring. I mean, that game on Christmas Eve last year was horrific. I mean, I was telling people this week, I was like, man, like if you guys don't just like absolutely love the Steelers or love the Raiders, you do not need to tune into this game on Sunday night. It will not be pretty football. You will not be entertained. Just do something better with your time. Like let Steelers and Raiders, two passionate fan bases, let them have at it. But y'all go do anything else. Go turn on whatever show you like on Netflix or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. Because last year was ugly too, man. That was an ugly game to watch. And I'm still mad Josh McDaniels didn't run the ball. He wanted to throw. I don't know if that was a tryout. I don't know if it was a tryout for it, or can you play in the cold car? Like, can we win the game? Can we just run the ball? We're at the 40. It's cold.
That's another difference I feel like from this year's game plan compared to last year's. Obviously, Carr is a different type of quarterback, but no Waller. Like they did bracket Waller and Adams a couple times last year. And Waller had a big play on him. Actually, I think it was on Minka last year in that game. But it's definitely going to be it's an interesting matchup, at least if you're a Steelers or Raiders fan. Probably not very interesting to anybody else.
Exactly. All right, man. I really appreciate you coming on and giving us a breakdown of the Steelers. Always love doing film with you, man. And like I said, guys, give him the follow at Steelers_DB. Make sure you follow him. Like I said, even if you don't want to see the Steelers stuff, the draft is excellent. So get some draft stuff for him as well. And of course, hit the subscribe button. Subscribe. I'm out.